Welcome back to the Money Script Podcast. It's your host, Johannes Harrison. So happy to be with each and every one of you again today. And yes, for those that are seeing this on YouTube, I do look very familiar. I was wearing the same thing on last week's episode. And that's because I just recorded 2 shows back to back. Give me a break. We are here at the Money Script Podcast, where we are here to bring you some financial literacy to help you make better financial decisions. I bring you some guests from all different walks of life to share more about their platform and how they are incorporating their money script into the everyday decisions and financial lives that they have. Today, I'm joined by a new friend, Liv Gagnon. Thank you, Liv, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, indeed. So she's the co-founder of Choir. Now, I have to give a shout out to Twitter because I learned about Choir from Twitter. I think it was Twitter, and it was probably our good friends over at Riskalyze. I think I was at the Riskalyze conference, and I don't know, a conversation got started on Twitter, and I said, whoa, this looks like an amazing organization. So they are a diversity tech platform, and I'll let Liv tell more about the specifics of what they do, but what drove me to learn more about them is that they have an initiative to get more women, people of color, of other cultures and nationalities into the financial stages. So I know, being a Black guy, I've been to lots of financial conferences, and many times it's maybe 3 or 4 people of color in the room and 3 or 4 women.
Yep.
Actually, it was a woman at Riskalyze. She said, I can't remember the name of her organization. It is Women in Finance. Is that it? Women in Finance. Anyways, we'll look up the organization later. We'll put a link in the show notes. But she said in her presentation, she said, even for me, I find that a lot of the financial conferences are old, male, pale, and stale.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, yes, it tends to be that way. Now, I do resemble the male part of it. I'm not very pale, though. So, Liv, thank you for joining us on the Money Script Podcast. We typically like to start with just opening up to a little bit of what's going on in the financial world right now. And the one thing that continues to come up, and I know we were talking about it a little bit before the show started, is this bank failure, or bank failures with an S. Just this week, we had good old Mr. Jamie Dimon, leader of that big bank, what's it called? JP Morgan Chase, who said that it's probably not going to be the last failure, which, I mean, that's a very broad statement to make, but it was pretty telling that he said, a lot of these banks are learning that they have to manage their balance sheets a little bit differently in a time of rising interest rates. And we've seen that there's some banks, some more data is starting to come out as we get quarterly reports of what some of these banks' balance sheets look like. And unfortunately, I think Mr. Dimon is correct. We probably have more banks that are going to be on that list. But if you go back a couple shows ago, we did talk about the FDIC and why the FDIC is important and what you can do if you have a fear of the solvency of your bank, and what you should look for when you're trying to diversify your banking needs. So I would encourage people, keep an eye on it, and know that there will probably be more. Is this the end of banking in America? That's not a shout out to that bank. I would say no. I think banks are going to be here for a little while. There's been a lot of bank failures. I was just listening to the book, The Ascent of Money. The chapter I was on by Neil Ferguson. The chapter I was on was about banks. I think it was called Bank Failures or something like Bank Bust. Can't remember the chapter name, but he told a story about the savings and loans banks back in the 80s that were being wildly speculative with real estate. Sound familiar? So just know we go through this. This is just a part of capitalism. And there are winners and sometimes there's losers. But enough about that. Let's get to our guest, Liv. So, Liv, tell us, because you mentioned that there is a big announcement that Choir is making here in the very near future that I'm really excited about. So let's just start in your own words. Tell me, why did you found Choir or co-found Choir?
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on this show. And to everyone listening, thank you for taking the time. So yeah, my name's Liv Gagnon. I co-founded along with Sonia Dreisler the company Choir, and we are a diversity tech platform. Our real core mission is to bring more voices of women, people of color, non-binary people to conference stages and to the media, in industries like finance that are predominantly old, male, pale, and stale, as we all know. Um, for so many reasons, we feel that, having representation on stage is not only important to bring more underrepresented voices into the industry, but also to show the existing leadership and the people who currently sit at the top what new perspectives can really bring to the financial industry. So we have a conference certification. We work with events to actually analyze their speaker lineups and measure, using 7 different visibility factors, how representative their speaker lineups are compared to the US representation. And then we quantify that into a number that essentially either conferences certify or they don't. So that's been really incredible to work with those events and really provide them that data. And on the other side is connecting those new voices to conference planners and journalists. My background is in PR and media relations, and there is such a stark contrast between the amazing work that so many different people are doing in the real world with real people, real communities, versus what we see in the headlines and what we see on conference stages. And so our platform called Voices is actually a way to connect underrepresented voices with journalists and conference organizers in a really easy way to eliminate those excuses that we often hear of, well, I couldn't find anyone that wasn't a white man. So those are really the two sides of Choir. And yeah, we're about to launch Voices out of beta, so we're really excited about it.
Now, I think I signed up for Voices. I think I
Did, yes.
did. I did. Is there anything else I need to do? I don't.
Not right now. So we have about
Okay.
400 people who have signed up for Voices in beta, which is amazing. We call them our experts on there, including you. We call them our voices. And we've really been using the platform, we call it in beta, just because it's been completely functional. And we just wanted to see how it worked and if journalists and conference planners were using it, and if they found it useful. And we've had so many voices on our platform connect to speaking opportunities, features in the New York Times, CNBC, NerdWallet, BuzzFeed, financial planning. I mean, we've had all of these incredible connections, and that's just been with people who've signed up on this platform in beta in the very first few months in September. And so once we actually launch, and you'll get those communications as a voice of what next steps to take and how to boost your profile. But we're just so excited to see how it takes off.
I'm excited too, because again, I've been in this industry for 22 years, and I can count on one hand. Yes, I can count on one hand the amount of times that a speaker wasn't old, male, or pale, or stale. Now, and that's when they were coming from the finance industry. Now, there's a lot of diversity in speakers that, of sports figures and writers and things of that nature that are outside of the finance industry that make it onto our stages, that are very diverse. But we don't find a lot of them in finance. So I want to say thank you for Choir creating this opportunity for all of us to have our voices heard, because whenever I'm on a stage, I deal with people coming to me afterwards that no matter what their background is, or their ethnic background, or sexual background, any of those, they come to me and say, thank you.
Hmm.
It was so good to hear from your perspective, and especially for those that are multicultural, they say, I appreciate you showing me that I could do this too.
Yeah.
That this is that our voices want to be heard and can be impactful. Because yeah, that there are we bring a different story very often. As many of my listeners and viewers know on YouTube that have been following for a long time, I come from a very poor background. My parents suffered or my mother suffered a disability when I was a teenager. And we went from rising middle class to government dependent in a matter of a couple of years. And so I know what it's like to, you know, purchase meals and food stamps.
Mhm.
So to go from that to being a financial advisor, and I look at risk a lot different than a lot of my clients do, because I've seen the risk firsthand. I also look at the cultural risks that exist as well when I'm working with clients that are either solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, or even employees. And those barriers that naturally exist for us that a lot of people just don't have to deal with. Um, and that came through a lot as a leader when I was leading an organization. When it came to hiring, one time I was asked, how do you keep getting so many diverse hires? I was like, I'm diverse.
Mhm.
That's how. It's like people walk up to me a little bit differently at the job fair when they see me. I attract a different crowd of people. They say, "Oh, wait, there's a black man over there. Hold on, in finance. How did you do that?"
Mhm.
So yes, I just want to say we appreciate the hard work you're doing. Can't wait for the next steps. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if some of the events that I've been invited to speak, I wonder if it had anything to do with you all, since you had other folks. I mean, they didn't tell me specifically they found it on Voice, but maybe they did.
Yeah, I wonder if hopefully that's a common occurrence is
Yeah.
start getting a lot more outreach. And, to your point, like we have this narrative in industries like finance, like healthcare, tech, just business in general, that at these job fairs, there's no diversity, right? Like, oh, well, we try, but all the people coming to these job fairs are also white men. There's nothing we can do about it. And that's not the reality. And it's not the reality when you look at young people coming into our industry. Like it's diverse. People are, first generation children who want to work with other families that have the same challenges that they did growing up. And these perspectives aren't just like a nice fluff piece, right? Like this is business, and we need these diverse perspectives at these job fairs, on stages, in the media, because we need not only people to see it and say, I want to work in this industry and use my personal background as my superpower so that I can connect with people. But also, we need the white dudes in the front row to see women of color on stage and brilliant Black women who are talking about leading companies and not just being thrown onto a DEI panel in the side room because they happen to be Black, right? We see that a lot. Like
Cool.
conferences are like,
Lot.
we have like we're focused on DEI. We had a DEI panel. It's like, well, who do you think's attending that DEI panel? Not the people that need to hear it. And also, the people on your DEI panel don't work in DEI, by the way. They just happen to not be a white man. And so, between that and, just I think there's been decades of white women getting most of the benefits from the DEI companies and programs that we've seen in these industries. And so, we sit, myself as a white woman who, I identify as queer, and I also know that I've gotten opportunities in my professional life that I probably wouldn't have if I was a woman of color. And so bringing all of this together and creating this platform and just being able to show the data, like show conferences, you think you're trying, but this is what your conference actually looks like. And oh, you say
Looks
there's
old,
no,
male, pale, and stale. That's what it looks like.
yeah, here's hundreds of people that don't look like you that we could connect you to in the next 30 seconds that you will learn from at your event. And so it's just such a pleasure to be able to help facilitate that.
Well, I definitely hope that I can make some introductions with choir into some of the medical spaces that I'm
Mm,
in. Because there are some organizations that are doing some really good work. Because I get invited, of course, to the DEI meetings at these
mhm.
conferences, and there are some organizations that are really doing the job.
Yeah.
That as they're talking about how to further their DEI, the I. That's the
Hmm.
one I love when I hear them talk about the I,
Yeah.
because it's one thing to be invited to the party. Um, it's something different to be asked to bring a dish and you know which dish to bring that you actually go home with an empty bowl.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of how I like to think about the
Yeah.
inclusion part. And I've watched some of these physicians get up in front of the room and say, "Hey, this is great, but are we really being inclusive here?
Hmm.
Our look at our on our leadership board, because a lot of times at the DEI events, the leadership board looks a little pale and stale.
Hmm.
Not always as male, but it still can be a little pale. It's like, okay, well, I thank you. We need your leadership, but we also need some of these other individuals to be included in that and for their ideas to be heard and their ideas to be taken into account. So I again, I appreciate the hard work that you're doing, especially in today's fast information moving age. Um, like, was it going to be tomorrow? Boy, it is. Anywho, not that kind of podcast. So one day I'm going to let it be, and I'm just going to just go off the rails and see what happens. I'm
Go
just going
for
to
it.
go for it. Go for it. Why not? So, with every guest that's on the show, we're going to divert a little bit here. We
Hmm.
like to talk about your money script, and your money script is really your relationship that you have with money and how you make decisions, especially decisions when you're under pressure when it comes to finance. And we believe a lot of that comes from the things that you learned as a child that were imprinted upon you.
Yeah.
So, with every guest, we ask you a simple question. So, Liv, what is your first memory of money?
That's actually, it's such good timing that we're having this conversation because
Oh,
this, being a startup founder, right? Being a 31-year-old startup founder, like this is um, a scary place to sit in with uncertainty. And I've been having to do a lot of that self reflection on, just making sure, like, it's scary not having consistent income or taking risks. And I've been wondering, like, why is the concept of money so scary to me? And trying to really address that now while I'm at the beginning of this journey so that I can really be self-aware as we grow the company. And so I have been thinking a lot about that lately. And I think my first memory of money was, I don't know if it's like money per se, but it was wondering why as a kid my parents had to be working so many jobs and like always be gone working when the other kids' parents weren't. Like it didn't make sense to me. Like my mom would wake up really early, bring me to like the most convenient daycare, and or my sister would watch me and she'd go to her first job and then come home, go to her second job, come home, sometimes go to her third. And um I remember that, like, oh, like work it, the amount that you work doesn't necessarily mean you have more money. Like my parents were still, I could see that struggle and they did their best, but I think I couldn't even tell you like what age, but I just remember being little and realizing that.
Mhm. I'm glad that you prefaced this with the fact that being a startup, you are dealing with some of those feelings and those risk factors
Mm-hmm.
that come with being a startup. And it wouldn't surprise me if you have some very early mornings and late nights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it also wouldn't surprise me if you were making a relation to your mother's situation because you're putting in the early mornings and late nights, and some days or weeks may not have a lot of financial remuneration to show for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, there is a big difference between you and your mother. She was a W-2 wage earner.
Mm-hmm.
You're an owner. You're a founder.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in the unique position of, yes, if you work harder, work smarter, do make good investments and good decisions with your organization, then the payoff can be really big in the future.
Yeah. I
Where
definitely see that relation of, um, when you own your own company, it's this weird in between of you can look at it as, well, I'm in control now. Like I can make something out of this and it's directly correlated to my ideas and how much work I put in. Or you could look at it as this is scary and could be out of control if like there was one crash or one thing that happened that everything I've done could go the other way. And so it's always for me like having to consciously choose to look at it as like I have a control that my parents didn't have when they were young because they were dependent on whatever jobs they were working.
yes, no, eat that fear for breakfast every morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Pour some milk on it. Don't let it get soggy. Eat it fast and
Yeah.
start the day. Start the day. Yes, from entrepreneur to entrepreneur or solopreneur to solopreneur. Actually, you're not solo. You have partners now. You're a
Mm-hmm.
co-founder. But as an entrepreneur, then from a solopreneur, um, if you're not afraid, then I will have to say you're not taking enough risk.
Exactly.
There should be some fear.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some oh shit moments. Like going to this meeting, like this meeting has to go really well. you know, this
Yeah.
pitch, this has to be the best pitch that we've ever done.
Yeah. Well, if there's not fear, that means that someone has already paved the way before, right?
yeah, no, there's
Because
no
you know
fear,
what
then
to
you're not
expect.
making an impact. There's
Yeah.
no impact.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make an impact, there's going to have to be a fear factor, something for you to overcome, something to force you to change, to grow, to caterpillar to butterfly, whatever
Mm-hmm.
phrase you want to use. That has to be there. That pressure needs to be there to push you to do something that's very uncomfortable. And really, at the end of the day, let's be honest, Liv, we're not doing it for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a service industry. We do it to better the lives of others.
Exactly.
And the bigger impact we can make on others, the bigger the gift comes back for us.
Yeah. And
And
yeah, I was just going to say, when we were starting choir, a lot of I'll call it what it is, unsolicited advice that we got from some people was, oh, you should make this into a nonprofit. And we were like, why? And we're like, we have a really solid, profitable business idea here. Well, diversity, like people just equate anything with diversity or helping people or, anything like that as, well, it must be a nonprofit. And we're like, no,
yeah,
we want to make money, because when we make money, the people on our team make money, and the people on our platform are getting more opportunities, and we want all of us to benefit from this. And so that just makes it easier, I feel like, to work those early mornings and late nights, because it's bigger than just Sonia, my business partner, and I, right? It's like we're doing this for everyone attached.
Yeah, I like to share with people, and because I get that sometimes too. Like, oh, have you ever thought about just just making like a nonprofit that creates financial literacy and all that great stuff? Like, yeah, when I have enough profit, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Once I have enough profit to be financially independent, I'm happy to do things for nonprofits. Like I give in other ways. I do. I'll go in classrooms and give financial advice and now not in these colleges and institutions with their billions of dollars of money. No, y'all go and write me a check.
Yes.
Yeah, I said it. But the public school system, oh, absolutely. I've given some of my most exciting talks I've ever had with, a group of 30 Girl Scouts between the ages of 10 and 14, or a bunch of seventh graders at an inner city school. Because some of them have never even heard of these concepts before.
Yeah.
They're completely foreign to them. Or meeting with a group of seniors that are graduating from high school and seeing how many are going to college versus how many are just going to get a job and say, is it W-2 or 1099? They just look at me like, what? Am I paid 1099 an hour? Like, no, that's not what that means. It's like, how are we sending you into the world without this information? Anyways, digress. So listen, Liv, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Let's recap just on a couple of things today. Number one, early on, we talked about, again, the bank failures that have been going on. And we shared some of the comments from one of the largest bank leaders that we have. And he said that it probably won't be the last. And he probably has a better idea of that than any of us, or even some of the talking heads that we see on television, YouTube, Twitter, what have you. So he might be right about that. But just know, as we said on a previous episode, that as long as you are within those FDIC limits, you shouldn't have much to worry about. But it can be stressful to think of what happens if you can't access your capital. That's a very low likelihood that you wouldn't have access to your capital for an extended period of time if you're within those rules. But it could happen. So for that reason, it may make sense to have another bank account somewhere. Okay, can't hurt as long as they're not charging you any fees. Like I said, we talked about that a couple of episodes ago. We also brought our good new friend, Liv Gagnon, onto the show. Thank you, Liv, for joining us. She shared with us a little bit more about the work she is doing with her partner, Sonia, over at Choir. I'm so excited to be one of the voices, just one. And I'm excited about some of the other relationships that we're going to build, and hopefully to be able to get them into some other arenas that need this data. Because for any of you listeners or viewers out there that go to conferences, and tell us, give us some feedback. The last conference you went to, how many people were there that looked just like you? How many people were on stage that looked like you? How many people were there that did not look like you, or that were you're far opposite? Was that diversity, equity, and inclusion happening in the stages and in the meetings of those conferences you go to? We'd like to hear about it. Well, actually, Liv wants to hear about it. I do. So if you are someone that sets up conferences and events, and you're looking for a speaker that is, I'm not old yet. I am male, not very pale, definitely not stale. Feel free, reach out to us. I'd be happy to learn more. Or if you're looking for up to 400 different voices from different walks of life, please reach out to Liv. She'd be happy to share more with you about our organization. So by the way, with that, Liv, how can the people reach you?
Yes, so you can go to hellochoir.com. That's our website, and you can find everything there, from how to get your conference certified. And by the way, that's conferences in any industry. Everything we do on the conference side is completely industry agnostic. So we'd love to hear from you. And if you are a voice, we are actually, when we launch our platform out of beta in just a few short weeks, we are, and I haven't mentioned this yet publicly, but we are expanding to business, finance, tech, and law. So if you're an expert with any amount of years under your belt, or whether you want to be a keynote speaker or on podcast, whatever interest you have, please go to hellochoir.com/voices and you can sign up. It takes about 10 minutes to sign up and fill out your profile, and we'll be excited to have you on that database. And we're on Twitter at Hello Choir.
I'm going to call some people out. Simone Redline, they said law. You heard me, yes. Simone. We're going to tag you and everything. So you're going to have to hear it. Like, why am I coming up on this show again? So yes, Simone.
Come on, Simone.
She was a friend of the podcast. She's in law, great speaker. She's already on a few different platforms, but she would be dynamic in front of some other rooms. Who else do I want to throw onto the bus? Not under the bus, on the bus. Let's see. George Dandridge, friend of the podcast, just from a couple of episodes ago. He is, Dr. George Dandridge. He is in taxation. And so he fits into that finance space. You know, actually, all the friends of the podcast, go check out Hello Choir. Let's come be a voice with me, and let's increase the size and impact that we have on our multicultural planet. Yes. With that, thank you so much for joining us for the Money Script podcast. We will see you next time. Take care. And I'll wear something different. Maybe. We'll see.